What is going on, everyone? James Hancock here. Just caught part 6 of Twin Peaks: The Return, aka Twin Peaks Season 3. And I don't know why, maybe I was just in the mood to laugh tonight, but I found tonight's episode absolutely fucking hysterical. I was cackling wildly through about half of it, and not at things that necessarily deserve to be laughed at, but there's something about this show where even when it doesn't necessarily make complete sense, or when it's really taking a long time to give us the clues or the information to allow things to make sense, at least there's always plenty of heartfelt emotion and humor and sometimes eroticism and terror. It's all about the feelings, the emotions, the intensity. And Mark Frost and David Lynch may or may not ever completely leave a trail of breadcrumbs that allows us to come to a great big aha moment. But if we enjoy the emotions and the experience along the way, then I feel like we're getting our money's worth from the show. So I remain a very pleased, very curious, very excited fan. If you've not seen my videos before, I come to the show much more as a David Lynch fanatic as opposed to a Twin Peaks fanatic. I recognize that there are some people who have spent the last 25 years really learning their shit, whether it's by attending film festivals or conventions or writing books about it, but there's obviously a Twin Peaks culture that knows this stuff really, really well. You can point to anybody in the back of the room in one of these club scenes at the Bang Bang Bar, and they'll say, oh, that's so-and-so's grandfather, and blah, 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 and they know their shit cold. I'm not one of those guys. I need reference guides, and I need help, and I greatly appreciate all the help I've been getting on my previous videos from some of the comments. But when it comes to knowing Lynch's style and his music and his photography and his filmography, there I'm much more on strong footing. So just so you know beforehand, this is not a video from the point of view of a hardcore Twin Peaks fanatic. It's from the point of view of a hardcore David Lynch fanatic, which has overlap, but are not always the same thing. Also, if you watched my videos before, you'll see that I'm not in my typical apartment. I am visiting family down in Virginia, and this is the only room that has a table where I can put my computer on some books and get something resembling a video. So yes, I recognize this is slightly unusual, but it's the best I could do under the circumstances. But let's dive into some Twin Peaks. So this episode gives us a ton of Dougie Jones, and in a weird way, I have a feeling 5-10 years down the road, there are going to be some people who like Dougie Jones as much as they do Agent Cooper. I know that might sound blasphemous to say, and we all look forward to when Agent Cooper fully gets kind of reconfigured with all of his wits about him. But there is something delightful about watching Dougie Jones in action. And I think Kyle MacLachlan is, in a very, very subtle way, doing some of the finest acting of his career. It's incredible what this guy's pulling off because we feel so much emotion for him. And he's saying almost nothing. It's almost like a pantomime performance from the silent era. But we get a ton of Dougie Jones in this episode. We get some very sweet scenes where he is brought home after getting essentially lost in the square outside of his office. And he keeps kind of fondly touching the star of the officer, brings him home, which for me makes me think that some part of Agent Dale Cooper is asserting himself because he's making that connection to figures of authority. Maybe I'm just projecting onto it what I want to see, but I feel like there is obviously a connection between Dougie and Dale Cooper's life as an FBI agent. We get some absolutely hysterical stuff on the home front with Naomi Watts' character asking him about where his car is. As we all know, his car was blown up, but she keeps asking. We, as the audience, know, and so that's one of the scenes where I just found myself cracking up. Or when he's saying goodnight to his son, and he's just doing little things like balancing potato chips on his knee. It's just, some people might find it silly, some people might find it a waste of time. I find it just adorable, and I love every second of Dougie Jones and his kind of befuddled confusion. In particular, when he tries to go to work on this giant stack of insurance claims, all these files that are incredibly important that he has to work on for the next day. And it reminded me a lot of when I was in business school. And when I went to business school, previously I'd been an English major and a film freak, and I had no quant background. But when I got to business school, it was micro-econ and finance and financial accounting and things like that. And there were many times where I'd sit down to do my homework at night, and I would look at it a lot like Dougie looks at that folder. And as he starts doing his little doodles and stairways and ladders and that sort of thing, it was basically about the equivalent of what I was able to do in some of these classes that I was subjecting myself to. But what's interesting is that he's doodling in all these case files, these lights start to appear and they start guiding him through. There's one name in particular, Anthony Sinclair, that seemed to be heavily emphasized. I don't know who that is. I have not Googled it. Maybe somebody knows who that is. In any case, that seems to be an important name. But then we get one of these classic Lynch moments where, as it goes to night, we get this great shot of a street light crackling and kind of going out. And it's one of those classic David Lynch transitions. Rather than just cut from one scene to the next, he just gives us this atmospheric, stylish, moody shot of a street light. And it's just one of those vintage Lynch moments. Or like little things like when Naomi Watts is on the phone and it's this bright yellow rotary phone from like the 1950s. Once again, classic Lynchian touch. I almost expected it to ring indefinitely, a lot like the phones we see in Mulholland Drive, which go into these incredible transitions as Naomi Watts' character arrives in LA for the first time. So if you like Lynch, there's a lot of Lynchian flavor in this soup for us to enjoy. But what's cool is that as Dougie goes to work the next day, he basically looks like Agent Cooper in his attire and his hair. It's almost like somehow, slowly but surely, Agent Cooper has come to life or asserting himself in spite of his befuddled, almost kind of senile way of approaching things. And I'm just loving seeing him piece by piece come back together. In a scene that's almost too brief, where if you blink you might miss it, but we got Miguel Ferrer as FBI agent Albert Rosenfield. He goes to a bar where we get to see Laura Dern make her appearance on this show. I mean, Laura Dern's been doing incredible work with Lynch for years. I mean, Blue Velvet, Wild at Heart, Inland Empire. I mean, she is part of like the David Lynch true inner circle. So she only turns her head and speaks for half a second, but at least she has made her appearance. So some of these missing pieces are coming together. So we get a little bit more of the Richard Horne character we saw from the previous episode. I mean, this guy's total scum. We saw him choking girls and acting like a total piece of shit in the previous episode. Now we see him talking to these mysterious drug dealers about bringing drugs down from Canada to Twin Peaks. We have this really interesting scene where this guy flips a dime, makes it come out of Richard's mouth, and then he catches it again. Very, very weird stuff. As Richard Horne returns to Twin Peaks, we get the arrival of Harry Dean Stanton. Harry Dean Stanton, for me, is one of... If you're going to do a Mount Rushmore of all-time great character actors, Harry Dean Stanton is in that conversation. I mean, going back to stuff like Cool Hand Luke, 50 years ago, this guy's been around for forever, and has basically looked the same the entire time. At any age, Harry Dean Stanton looks like Harry Dean Stanton, but he's a Lynch regular as well from Wild at Heart, Straight Story, and he's part of Lynch's inner circle. He is an old man, and we see him going into town right at the time where Richard Horne is blasting through an intersection with this truck and just crushes this kid. We have this horrible scene that your heart just goes out to this mother. She's cradling her dead child. And as she does so, Harry Dean Stanton sees what looks essentially like yellow smoke wafting up from the child. You could call that a soul, you could call that whatever. Perhaps Harry Dean Stanton has a connection to whatever this force is that Dougie keeps seeing under different circumstances. More to come on that as we learn more about that over the course of this season. But we do see him at least comforting this girl. So Harry Dean Stanton, more please. He's always awesome. So one interesting side note about watching this episode, I was watching it with my 15-year-old sister. She is not a fan of Twin Peaks. She is not a fan of David Lynch. And I very deliberately told her nothing because I just wanted to see someone completely unexposed to this stuff, how they would respond. And she just kept saying, like, this is weird, it's not for me, etc. But she did actually identify something that I did not. And I think sometimes having someone who's a totally impartial viewer can pick up on certain things. But we see this character who I love from Mulholland Drive. I always call him like the Winkies character because he's in that great Winkies scene where they find that horrible creature in the alleyway. But he's dealing with this envelope, has this black circle, and we see the envelope arrive at the home of this skinhead dude. And it's got a picture of Dougie and a picture of a girl. And he's taking this, like, looks almost like an ice pick, but it's like a thick, nasty ice pick. And he's jabbing at him and he's getting all fired up. And somehow I didn't even notice this. And my little sister said, he looks like a midget. And I kind of disregarded it, like, whatever, you don't know what you're talking about. But sure enough, we see him later in the episode, and he is in fact a small person, or a short person, or a dwarf, or whatever you want to call him, and he's going after one of these two targets. He goes after the girl first, and it's a pretty gruesome, violent scene. He tears her up, tears up a witness, but Dougie is next on his list. Best part of this episode by far, Dougie sits down with his boss, and his boss at first is just livid with rage, going through all these case files. They all seem to be useless. It's just doodles and ladders, and it's just nonsense. But at a certain point, he starts to digest, and he starts comparing and contrasting. He starts looking at some of the notes, and finally says, like, Dougie, thank you for bringing this to my attention. I would appreciate it if you keep this to yourself, but I may call upon you for more help. And Dougie's just kind of taking it in and doesn't even know how to shake hands or accept the congratulations, but it's such a simple scene, and on the page, I'm sure it looks like nothing, but as it's performed by McLaughlin and staged by Lynch, I was like screaming with laughter. And if you try to explain to somebody why it's funny, it'll all just fall to pieces. But there's something just bananas about seeing Dougie solve some sort of scandal behind the scenes at this insurance company. And somehow I feel like just the powers of observation of Dale Cooper are somehow coming through, even if he is totally crippled and unable to communicate in any way, shape, or form. We got a great scene with Jeremy Davies, an actor who I always enjoy. He turns out to be one of the loan sharks who's one of the loan sharks who is harassing Naomi Watts' character for money from Dougie. She meets with him. She blasts him out of the water for his exorbitant interest rates because she works at a bank, and she is convinced that they are charging way too much, and so she decides to give them 25% interest as opposed to like the 300% interest or whatever it was they were asking for. She seems to, at least in the short term, to have solved that problem. So at last, one of the crucial riddles of this season starts to at least appear to be coming together, but Deputy Hawk, he goes into the men's room at the station and he drops a coin. He follows the coin, and when the coin lands in a men's room, see, when the coin lands on one side, it's got the face of a Native American. He then turns around, sees a Native American on a brand that's in the bathroom stall. If you remember, he is trying to solve the crime through some connection to his people. He then sees that the frame of the door is not completely sealed shut. Gets out a wrench, rips it open, finds a handwritten note. Booyakasha. At least it appears as if this is the one mystery David Lynch is not going to allow to remain totally unresolved. We don't know what the contents of the letter are, but at least some of what's been being teased with Deputy Hawk pay off, which is awesome. We're making progress. And lastly, we get a small scene. I'm not quite sure where this is all going, but Sheriff Truman's wife, Doris, comes back to the station to give him some grief about her father's car not working, and he's trying to calm her down and solve her problems. And some of the guys from the office are talking a little smack about her. And we learn that she basically got to be like this after her son, who was a soldier, committed suicide, and she's never been the same. So while we might have had some fun at her expense in the previous episode, we realize she actually deserves quite a lot of sympathy. Bringing the episode to a close, another phenomenal fucking scene in the Roadhouse Bang Bang Bar. I mean, every band we've seen to date perform in that bar has been awesome, but this one was particularly good. I don't know the name. I don't know the name of the song. Whip out your phone, Shazam it. The song was fucking dope. Loved it. So yeah, I have to say, this is one of the stronger episodes of the season so far. We're at the 1/3 mark through the season. That's actually a decent chunk of story. So yeah, I feel like this is no longer the fresh new show. We're actually deep into the narrative, and I'm in. I know some people have been frustrated. Some people have been obsessing over trying to solve things that may or not be able to be solved. But for me, I'm just loving the ride. And so thank you so much for watching. I really, really appreciate it. If you want to talk more, please feel free to leave a comment in the comments below or give me a shout on Twitter at Colbrax, because so far in all the previous videos, the people who know a hell of a lot more about Twin Peaks than I do have been extremely helpful in offering theories as well as help with names and details, because there's so many little teeny tiny like Easter eggs that I just totally am oblivious to, because while I've seen season 1 and 2, I've seen season 1 twice and I really enjoyed it, I do not have an encyclopedic knowledge of the show. So hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. And I'll be back at y'all in the very near future. Onwards and upwards.